Hey, thanks for watching video number 2 in the soil feeding schedule explanation video series. If you haven't watched the first one, you can do that, and that's about setting up your 15-gallon geopot for no-till. And these principles will apply to a larger container or a smaller one, but to make it specific, we're going to talk about one 15-gallon container and building the ecosystem for the no-till process. Part of that is what I call the ramp up, and if you've not been on multiple cycles, we want to get to a point where you have a decaying mulch layer, where you have worms, where you have this interaction on the surface of the soil that normally comes later down the road. And that will bring you up to speed a little bit faster so we can get those really healthy plants like you see on Instagram or maybe on the videos or maybe at your buddy's house. So this is the blog post. Let me show you where you can find the actual the spreadsheet that we're going to go over. If you go to the growing system and you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see this picture of a spreadsheet. And if you click on it, it's actually going to download this, and that'll allow you to follow along with me. You can print it out, do whatever you'd like. I'm going to try and zoom in here, and then maybe I can kind of move it over so that my video is not blocking it. So let's resize that. All right, that should work so that we can kind of go over this together without the video blocking everything. So I'm going to be mainly focusing on this part here, the top part. And the reason why is this is based on our no-till bundle, and I'll have the link in the blog post. So if you want to go to BuildASoil, check out the no-till bundle. You can see all the products back here I'm going to go over with you today. And each one of our videos is going to have the way to use these and how to read this chart and interpret it. So it's not totally self-explanatory, but I think once you watch the video, you'll get to the point. All right, let's just dig in. Week 1 is what this video is about, and so that's right here. You can see that in week 1, we're going to be either dealing with seedlings or rooted cuttings. And so this first week would be what I would say, let's say if you've got seedlings, you're going to plant the seed. We'll have a separate video on that. And you'll get them standing up, and once they first open, drop their seed, and you can see the first leaves, that's the point where we'll kind of call them week 1. And the reason why I have a different schedule for week 1 and week 2 is in week 1, we just want to make sure that we get everything started up right. A lot of times during the first week or two, we'll do a higher amount of light, and then we'll kind of gradually work them towards flowering. And so in week 1, we recommend 20 hours of light on and 4 hours of light off. That's where this photo period line comes in all the way across. So the reason why we do the 20 hours of light on and 4 off is that we think there's a benefit to the dark period, and I'll get into that right now. So the dark period is a time where the plants get to rest a little bit, and they'll actually be able to send some of their root exudates out of their roots, some of the sugars that they've built up through photosynthesis. And this feeds the biology in the soil, and I believe that it gives them some rest time. Now, when you talk to other growers and when you do research, you're going to find out that there's a lot of information about how these plants work with photosynthesis, and that they don't really require a rest period. Some plants actually build and go through certain processes at night, and it's a requirement for their life cycle, where cannabis is not one of those. And so if you're growing cannabis and you're using 24 hours of light with no off time, that's totally acceptable. However, I just feel that I've noticed the plants are a little healthier when we have a little off time. And a lot of times when you get doing this year round, you're not going to want some massive speed of growth in your clone seedling and in your regular small veg area, just because a lot of times you're trying to just keep things very healthy, and if they're growing super fast, a lot of times that's going to create more work for you to keep them healthy and keep transitioning them into the next phase of their life. So keep that in mind. We don't want to get this boom and bust period with our organic grow. We want to see very consistent, very disciplined stewardship of the garden so that we get very dedicated plants that have this very even keeled growth, instead of growing fast and then getting unhealthy and then getting them back to health, and then you'll see that, and that's kind of a reflection of you and your lifestyle. And so I've gone through those periods, and I try and notice the differences. And for sure, when I'm disciplined and dedicated to daily activity in the garden, I do a lot better. And so the way you're going to read this, besides that photo period, is to look at the ingredients here on the left and go to the amount. And this amount, this feeding schedule, is basically, we want you to hit this at least once per week. You can basically mix them all together, or you could do half of them now, half of them later. But let me get to the bottom of the most important pieces of the puzzle So you can use these ingredients like tools rather than just blindly following the schedule. And so let me go and tell you the idea behind it. The aloe vera flakes, you can use homegrown aloe, which we talk about down here in the do-it-yourself, but I'm going to stick away from that and just go with our products for now. If you use a 1/4 teaspoon of a freeze-dried aloe vera flake, that's going to give you a lot of benefits, including the salicylic acid that we know is a constituent in aloe vera. This activates the plant's defense system. Another component of aloe is that it's got all the vitamins and amino acids, and it's also got a saponin quality that helps moisturize and helps evenly spread the moisture through the peat and the new soil. And so the idea is to get some sort of saponin in the water most every time you water in the container to make sure that we keep even moisture wicking all the way through. In the veg period, a little aloe goes a long way, and that is this product right here. They're freeze-dried flakes. I like to keep these in the freezer. They keep really well without that. The coconut in particular, the freezer is really the best place, but they're freeze-dried, so I just keep them in the freezer, and I dip in my little spoon, which I normally keep in there right in the freezer, and I do a 1/4 teaspoon per gallon. I put this in first. You know what? I wanted to grab the Thermic. Maybe I'll go get a bottle here in just a second. But I've also got the Thermic 70 Yucca extract. And so that is something you use at 2 to 3 milliliters per gallon. It's thick like molasses, and that'll really make the water soapy. The reason why we do that is before we add any of these other ingredients, we want to make sure they're going to disperse through the water, and they're not going to just clump up and float in the water. And so that's really what these products are for, especially the Thermic 70. Now, here's the thing with BuildASoil, and with most people that are growing no-till, we don't want to just get something that's more of a wetting agent, meaning you could throw soap in there, but that's going to have negative effects. And so the aloe vera has amino acids, vitamins, all the stuff we talked about. Thermic 70 Yucca, if you look up the growth benefits, the plant growth enhancements that come from saponin, you'll see that there are a number of benefits to using saponin besides just the wetting factor. So either way, we've got the listed amounts in here. And so you can do this every watering, or you can do this once a week, and the rest can be plain watering. And in a 15-gallon, we're typically watering about 5% by volume every day or so, depending on the speed of growth of the plant and the humidity of your grow environment. But that rule of thumb usually allows you to undershoot it more consistently as opposed to go through these overwater and underwatering cycles. And on a 15-gallon, that's 3/4 of a gallon of water almost every day. And we use the Chapin sprayer to do that red sprayer can, so that we can mist it or we can take off the nozzle and just hose it. And so now you've got your Yucca, or you've got your Yucca and your aloe, and it's in the water, and you've stirred it up. I like to use a bucket and then dump it in my Chapin, or you can mix it right in the Chapin. It's totally up to you, depending on how much you have to make for the day. And I'll usually make up, 4 gallons at a time, because that's what'll fit in that Chapin when it's packed full. 3.5 is a little better, but anyways, 4 gallons easier for me to measure. So the next is the Rootwise Microbe Complete, and this is really, really important on week 1. So I'll grab this product. This is one of my favorite products. It's manufactured in the United States. We can go into details all day, but for now, you got this in the kit. This is going to be the Mycorrhizae that we want to establish connection with the plant root system immediately, as young as possible with the plant. So if you've got seeds, you can do that as soon as you see the seed come out. That's why it's in week 1. If you've got clones, you can do this immediately after you transplant. Along with the mycorrhizae, there's a whole bunch of other beneficials in here, from enzyme producers, nitrogen fixers, sodium solubilizer, or like digesters. And so when you look at this consortium, it's no wonder that we paired it with our living soil, because now we're able to translate some of the best effects. And if you'd like to brew your own compost tea, you can do that. We've got recipes down here. But like I said in the beginning, I want to stick to the products that are going to have duplicatable results for everyone. And this is very important. If you're trying to follow along and you don't have all these products, make sure you get a mycorrhizae product. You might already own one. Otherwise, this is what I'd look at. And then the next product, so let's see, that is at 1 teaspoon per gallon. So I've got the Yucca in the water already. Now I'll just sprinkle a teaspoon in. And then a lot of times I'll just start adding all the other ones before I stir. It's up to you. You can stir with every addition if you'd like. The next thing that we add is the Rootwise enzymes, the biocatalyst. The reason why that we do that is these are soil microorganisms. These are the enzymes that these produce. And so they've all been made together on organic, non-GMO substrate. And this is very, very potent. And so a little goes a long way. You can see that you use 5 milliliters of this per gallon. The way I like to measure this is usually with one of these mixture little shot glasses. We sell them. I usually have several of them next to where I grow. That way I can measure everything out and just dump it in. And sometimes when you get comfortable, you'll start eyeballing because these materials are pretty easy to work with. But the biocatalyst, I want you to keep in the refrigerator. It actually says refrigerate after opening right on there. It's so biologically active that if you get anything jumping in there, it's going to start to grow. And so I undo the cap, I pour out my shot, I put the cap back on, and I put it back in the fridge. And that way it'll last years. Okay, it's a very shelf-stable product. I think they mention a time frame on here and they have an expiration date, but it'll last longer than that if you keep it in the fridge and take good care of it. All right, so now we've got our wetting agent like the Yucca, the Aloe. We've sprinkled in our enzymes and our microbe complete. And then the next one you can see is the Biophos. That has 0. That's because that's going to be more towards flowering. We're going to switch over later. The other one that you can look at would be the Thriven Aminos, and that's listed right here. And so the Thriven Aminos, you can see it's a 1500. Don't let that scare you. This isn't really about the nitrogen. It's about the amino acids that are built in here. And so a little bit of this goes a long way. It really helps the plant start to chelate and pick up some of the other minerals that are in the soil. It helps it to pull up an available nitrogen source that's very healthy. And we don't see the negative effects like we do using typical nitrogen fertilizers. So this is more about those amino acids. You can foliar it, you can feed it through the soil, but 1 teaspoon through a foliar or a drench. And so if you're mixing all this together, you're probably going to be drenching it in the water. And that's where I would do the teaspoon per gallon. Okay. Next, we've got the Big 6 micros. And so you might have TM7 from Faust. Go ahead and use that if you'd like. This is the Big 6 that we sent with your kit. This is basically the same product from Faust BioAg, but we took out the iron, we doubled the manganese, and it fits the micronutrient profile of what we were seeing on our soil testing more often. So this is going to be, as opposed to trying to build the soil off of an individual soil test with micronutrients for your batch, using a little bit of this is going to defeat that limiting factor and allow you to make sure that you never have a boron issue or a zinc issue or a manganese issue. And I got to tell you that in soils with a little bit above, a little bit of a higher pH, which happens a lot with a lot of compost and minerals, and soils that have a lot of organic matter, which we do when we have lots of compost, it's a lot harder to get micronutrients. And that's one of the challenges, and that's why we use kelp and all those things and rock dust. But this Big 6 is on here at 1/4 teaspoon per gallon, and I want you to do that at least once per week. And on this first week, you can mix it with everything, or like I said, if you just want to do a foliar of the Thriven and do the enzymes and do that once a week and maybe do this at a separate time, you can totally do that. I usually just mix it all together on Monday and make sure I get everything at least once. So that's the Big 6, 1/4 teaspoon. This will turn your water kind of black. The other thing to be aware of when you're using this is the humic acid in here has a little bit of granular texture to it. And it's done like that on purpose. It's kept more in its raw state instead of being ground to a powder. And sometimes it'll clog your little sprayer nozzle. So when I use this, a lot of times on the Chapin sprayer, I'll remove the nozzle and just use the hose tip. And that'll really help. Okay. The next thing here is the Thermic 70. We already went over that. I'm probably going to change the order of these and say that that's like the first thing to add, but that's why I'm making this video, right? To get better. Freeze-dried coconut water. I usually start adding that instead of the aloe a little later. You can add it now, totally, if you'd like, but to keep things cost-effective, I typically start using it in flowering. The craft blend, we're not going to use any at this point. You should have already sprinkled just a little bit on your soil, which we talked about setting up your container on the video number 1. This is video number 2. The Build a Flower top dress, we already used that. The Grow Kashi, we already used that. The last one is the tweetment. And so if you've got some clones instead of seeds, you might want to mix up 1/2 ounce per gallon of this tweetment. It's a plant wash. It's got enzymes in it that actually eat and degrade fungal cell walls and pests. It causes them to molt and die. So while it's not like a pesticide, it's definitely a really, really good approach to cleaning your plants and to making sure they stay pest-free. And so I would take 1/2 ounce of this. I mean, when you're dunking it, you could probably go up to 2 or 3 ounces per gallon. But if you're using seedlings, you want to keep it a little less so you don't get the soil, totally saturated. So use 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce of this per gallon. And then you're going to dunk your clones into it, hold it underwater, move it around, and then then you can plant them in your system. Otherwise, if you've already all planted up, you can just put them in your sprayer and you can spray them down. Get the underside of the leaves, get the top of the leaves, and we prefer to do it with lights off, but this one is very gentle, so it won't have any issues either way. All right, so that takes you through the first week. The only other option would be to do a compost tea recipe with the ingredients that you have in the kit. In the kit, you're going to have the Build-A-Flower top dress, the craft blend, the Thriven, and you can brew all these together like this in a bucket using an air stone. We sell a compost tea kit, and you can water the soil with that. A lot of people do that when they're making their soil at home to make sure that it's moistened with all this biology. I think it's best to do a compost tea when you already have the plant's roots in there and that's growing, but either way, compost tea is great. I think in the first week, if you're doing all this, you probably don't need this compost tea. But I think that if you only do this once a week, there's going to be several other waterings where you may just want to do something extra for your plants. And the other thing to consider as we get later down the line is if you're growing a big plant in a smaller container, you might have to use these compost teas or these products more than once a week. So keep that in mind. Next up, we're going to go a little bit faster through the next videos so that I don't waste so much time on these little details because some of it's going to be duplication as I go through this. I really think that now that we've gone through one, you'll kind of see how I want you to read through this system. But I don't want you to miss any points. So the third video is going to be on vegetative cycle still, week 2 all the way through the final veg period. And that video you can find coming up right here next. I hope this video helped. You can email us always at support@buildasoil.com or give us a call and we'll do our best to help you. Thanks.